Hi there, I'm Jason Ball, and this is Life After News. Michaela Pereira anchored at KTLA, CNN, Headline News, and Good Day LA before deciding to take her skills in a different direction on TV. You'll hear more about that in today's episode, as well as why she almost turned down her first TV job, but her advisory board, remember that term, her advisory board talked her into taking it. And then we have a great deep conversation about bystander trauma and what that means, particularly to journalists. So let's start in the beginning.
Are we really going into the Wayback Machine?
We're not going to go deep into it. I just want to do a little quick overview.
Sure.
So you were born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, but you grew up in...
We're on my Wikipedia.
But you grew up in British Columbia. How did you get into broadcasting?
Completely by accident. And for a long time, Jason, I was reluctant to tell people that story because I was working alongside all of these people that had, gone to journalism school, had done applied communications, had grinded out, those years in school, training and dreaming of being in the industry. And I'm a person of faith, so I believe there was a divine hand on my shoulder, but it happened, quote unquote, by accident. I can say this. I was working like the Jamaican I am. I had a zillion jobs. I did all the things. I was putting myself through college, and I had, at that time, 4 or 5 part-time jobs. And one of them was, as reluctantly, because I was very much a thinking woman. I did not, I was not about the aesthetic. My roommate was a model, and she was always getting these modeling gigs and what have you, just local stuff, hair shows and fashion shows and things like that, because she really had aspirations. I was just trying to pay the bills. And I had been struggling. I remember one time, like, am I going to pay my car insurance, or am I going to eat? That starving student challenge, right? And she's like, well, you should just do some modeling. You could do some hair shows or something. I was like, fine, I'll do it. And so I started doing a little bit of modeling at the time and held my nose. And by the way, no shade to anybody that does it, but it wasn't what I was interested in. And I just sort of felt like I needed to be judged on the contents of my heart and not the way I looked. That's the way I'd been raised. And I didn't get a lot of modeling gigs because I wasn't like this leggy, lithe blonde, you know what I mean? But they did love my hair, and so I'd get a lot of hair shows and fashion shows and what have you. We got a call that they were looking for somebody to do a PSA, a public service announcement, and it was one on diversity. And I was like, Blondie, hold my beer. I got this one. And no lie, I'm going to tell the truth here. I can't believe I'm coming clean. I put in my fake nose ring. Remember, it's like 1990-ish. Yeah, 1990-ish. Put in my fake nose ring. It's when I still, wore crop tops and a cute little outfit. And I went on down to the TV station to audition for this PSA. And again, remember, pre-internet, pre-cell phone, pre-reality TV, pre-Kardashians, pre-Paris Hilton, pre-all of that. I had no designs on television. I didn't know anything about it. My parents weren't TV watchers. It wasn't part of our reality. So me even going down for this interview was so left field. I went, and it really was an incredible PSA, really about celebrating the diversity. The campaign was called Imagine a World Without Contrast. The woman that was the producer was this hotshot producer from Toronto named Moira Rogers, who went on to become my agent later, many years down the line. And she saw something in me and kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, you've got something. And a year later invited me to audition for this around the town kind of afternoon magazine show, because the hosts were going on vacation. And I auditioned for that. I thought I was going just as a relief fill-in person, but at the end of the week, it was a terrible week, my first week of television. Terrible week. I hope those tapes have been burned. The host that I was filling in for decided not to come back from Costa Rica or wherever she was vacationing. And they looked at me and said, would you like the job? And I remember calling my dad, because Jason, you have to understand, I was this kid that had a 5-year plan. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to study linguistics. I'm going to be a translator for the UN. This was the whole plan. And I called my dad and said, they've offered me this job and I'm freaking out because this isn't my plan. This isn't part of my plan. And he's like, record scratch. He's like, how much did you earn last year? And I told him $11,000 or something. And he was like, how much are they willing to pay you? And I think, I'm making this up, don't quote me, I think it was $32,000. And he's like, take the damn job, dummy. And I took the job. And I suppose the rest is history. There's a lot of time and space in between that, but I suppose that's really how it all started.
That's amazing. And then you went to Tech TV, which was, in San Francisco. You
Yeah.
immigrated to the U.S.
Yep. Yep.
And then
Good old Tech
that
TV.
wasn't that
I still
long.
have people stop me on the street and be like, I love Tech TV. And I was like, see, I love my early geeks. I really do.
But then you went to KTLA pretty quickly there too, and that had to have been a huge jump.
There were a bunch of leaps, like the leap of leaving Canada. So here's what happened between you and me and the fence post. I had a starter marriage. Very young. I was married and divorced by the time I was 25. And I had already started my TV career and had sort of hit the ceiling of what I could do at this station. I was doing this was at Czech TV, my first job. I'd done the weather. I was doing an entertainment show. I was doing this around town show. I knew I did it. This is the irony. I knew I did not want to do news. So I know, famous last words. Famous last words. Oh, what a dummy. And so I started applying everywhere. I applied all over the shop and I got this job in San Francisco. So this job with Tech TV, it was early on. It was called ZDTV. It became Tech TV a few years later. That was a huge leap going from, a small city in Canada to America. Like that, it really gave me such a great deal of understanding and compassion for people. Because I'm an immigrant, right? I'm an immigrant. I can't pretend that I'm not. I really am. Not that I would. But it gave me a real insight into that feeling of coming here that I think has really deepened my understanding of what it must be like for people that come from far away. Like we often think of Canada as just the neighbor, but it is a vastly different country. And so this was a whole new thing for me. And then moving from San Francisco to LA was another major shock.
It's funny because I think people think that San Francisco and LA, people not from California think they're the same, but there could not be more different.
Friends come close. Let's tell you a little story about the cousins of California and Los Angeles. They are, and ne'er the two shall meet. You know that. Like it goes beyond the Giants and the Dodgers. My partner of 21 years, he jokes that San Francisco's always hating on LA, but LA don't even pay attention to San Francisco. And I'm like, come on, man, you can't say that. They both are incredible, incredible cities, and they are about as different as you could imagine, right? They're not the same.
So then you ended up at KTLA.
9 blissful years.
But that had to be, let's face it, that was a big show and a lot of big personalities.
I'm really glad I didn't know. I'm really glad I didn't know what I was getting into, because I think, I was young enough that I was like, yeah, I can do it. I was young and dumb. And so I figured I could take it on. I remember I'm going to say it. I'll call him out. Michael Eaves, who is like my brother from another mother. He's a Sports Center anchor at ESPN. If you're a sports fan, you watch him on Sports Center. He and I had known each other a long time, and I called him excited that I gotten the job at KTLA, and he kind of paused. He's like, "You think you can handle that?" Excuse me, sir. And he wasn't wrong, because it was a big, gigantic job. Not the job itself, but stepping into a legacy station, a legacy show, and 3 guys who had known each other for a long time, and everybody knew and loved them. I'll tell you what my advantage was. I had before replaced a beloved figure on TV, my very, very first job. That very first job I did, I replaced a woman named Connie who was beloved. For a year and a half, 2 years, I walked around that town. Where's Connie? Where's Connie? I was like, this is killing me. But then after a while, people got used to seeing me. And to this day, I can proudly say, and this is not a boast, I'm humbled by this. I left that market in 1998. When I go home to visit my family, people still fondly remind me of how much they loved my show with Gordy. Check around. They talked to me about it as if it was yesterday. So that, first of all, that's a privilege and an honor, and I can't believe my luck. But to come to KTLA, there was a point of transition after Giselle had left. They had a few people filling in. And so I didn't displace somebody that was beloved, thank goodness, because that would have been an impossibility. That was the only thing that was working for me in my favor.
That's true. I do think what you said is true. I've taken plenty of jobs in like a year, and I thought, if I'd known this was a job, I'm afraid I would have taken it.
Right. No,
But
and by the way,
they can serve you well.
no regrets. No regrets. I think so fondly, and I have such warm feelings still to this day for my KTLA family, you included. Like I loved my time there. I'm grateful for my time there. It changed me. It affected me. Stays with me. And by the way, I live in Los Angeles still, right? So I still get hugs from viewers, and I still have people like, we were at a restaurant the other day, and the server at True Food Kitchen in Marina del Rey or in El Segundo, he told me all the things about, all the people and how long do you remember that time that Eric Spillman, no, he didn't even call him Eric Spillman. He's like, do you remember that time that Spillman? And I'm touched by that, Jason. You and I both know that being on in the morning is such a privileged relationship with the viewer, right? You're allowed into their home at their most vulnerable, when they're feeding the dog, getting the kids ready for school, walking around in their jams, if that, starting the day, and to invite us into their home at that particular time. It's a tender spot, and I don't take any of that lightly. It touches me. It still touches me.
It's so true. Those KTLA super fans are amazing. Literally a month ago, I was walking down Palm Canyon Boulevard in Palm Springs, and this man goes, "Hey," and you don't know me, but did you used to work at KTLA? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you're like, yes, question mark. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It is truly, truly a beautiful thing. And like, for people that are out there listening, don't stop. Like, just keep saying hi,
For sure. For sure. So I feel like you're a West Coast person. British Columbia, California.
Thank you for recognizing. Actually, so can you see that behind me? California girl at heart. It actually, let me see if I can see it, show it better. A friend made this for me a few years. I should put West Coast girl at heart, because it's true.
That's true.
It's true. I think that's why New York and I didn't.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Then you got the call to go to New York, and how was that?
I couldn't say no.
Yeah.
I couldn't say no. It was an opportunity of a lifetime. And it's funny, I gut checked it with my, Sonny Hostin years ago advised me to have a, advisory board in my life. And it's something I've heeded, and it's something I had before I even knew that I had it. My advisory board is my sister, my mom and dad, and my partner. And I gut checked the move with them. I'm like, am I crazy at 42 moving to New York to take a job? Like, is that insane? I've lived my entire life on the West Coast. And to a person, they said, you'll regret it if you don't. We've got you. My partner even said, I'll keep the home fires burning. You go do a look-see. If it fits, great, we'll figure it out. If it doesn't, you can always come home. Best advice I've ever been given.
How was that transition, though, going from local to the national cable scene?
I'm going to be honest, it was cold. And look, I'm a Canadian saying that. I moved to New York for the two polar vortexes that happened back to back. So even like my Canadian, Northern Canada too, right? Like I was raised in Northern Canada. I was shooketh by the cold. So that affected my reaction to New York City. Look, I love Manhattan. I love New York. I think it is an incredible, electric place. And I remember being terrified of the people, because you watch the movies, you see the shows, they have this reputation, and I'm like a softy West Coastie, you know what I mean? I quickly learned that they're the salt of the earth. They've been through the worst hell in the form of 9/11. They are a strong people. They are a charismatic people. They will stop on the street, and if you even have a glimmer of looking lost, will help you figure out where you're going. They're tough. Grocery shopping there is like full contact sport, not going to lie. But I loved that experience of living in Manhattan, taking the subway, going to the park, living in a intensely urban city, right? Like it is you walk everywhere, you take the subway, you take cabs, you're living on top of each other. And I made the most of it. The job itself was intense as you would expect it to be. I remember just like having to like muster up all my gumption, knowing that I am in the same room at the same table as Christiane Amanpour, as Wolf Blitzer, as Anderson Cooper, right? So I was like, Fareed Zakaria, like, here we go. Stand up, be counted, work hard, show up. It was intense. I talk about it now as if it was my own professional Everest, and it was. It was.
You were glad to come back to California.
Yeah, I think not early on. Early on, I was just like, whoa. But by 2 years in, because I was there a total of 3 years, 2 years in, and trying to get home to visit my parents on Vancouver Island, right? So from here, I could do the morning show. Let's talk about KTLA. When I was on KTLA, I could do the morning show, head over to LAX, and be home to my parents in time for dinner the same day. From New York, it would take me, after the show, it would take me a day and a half to get home to my parents. And my parents are, they're in their 80s and I enjoy them. I like being with them and they're precious to me. And I wanted to be closer and be able to get there in a hurry if necessary. And I couldn't get there in a hurry. And I was also starting to feel like I really felt my West Coastness coming out in me. I needed open space. I needed trees and ocean. And look, there's ocean there. It's a different ocean. And I had trees, but I needed like more, and I needed some palm trees, and I needed space and room to breathe. And so I was lucky enough to be able to come back to the West Coast, transitioned over to HLN, and they gave me my own show on HLN, and came and did that show out of the CNN studio when it was still on Sunset. They've since moved to Burbank, and did that show there for 2 years, which was a real hoot. And then, by the way, I did something pre a lot of people. My show team was largely in Atlanta. I only had maybe 4 people with me, if that. Yeah, 4 people with me out of the LA studio, and we did everything remotely. And that was pre-pandemic. And it was bumpy because you know enough about me, Jason, that I'm like a tactile person. I'm touchy-feely. I need to reach out and be with my people and be with my team. So that was a challenge, but we did it. We did the dang thing.
I didn't realize that. So the control room and the producers were in Atlanta,
Everybody.
and you were in
Everybody.
Los Angeles.
Yep, the executive that oversaw the show, the whole control room. They had a switcher. They had a few technical people, and there were like studio crew that did the show and any other shows out of the CNN studio. But yeah, all of my team, and I'd go back there. I tried to go back every 3 or 4 months just to like look them in the eye and talk to them and bond with them, because if they're the writers and producers are the soul of your show, and if they can't reach out and touch you, it's hard to do that. So I made a point of that, to get with them and maybe have an adult beverage now and then with them and that kind of thing.
So how did you end up at Good Day LA? So I actually don't know the answer to this question.
Oh, this is exciting. Okay, so after HLN, I used that time to take a break and sort of like reconfigure, because I had been going solid for the 20, at that point it was like 27, 28 years of my career, from job to job to job to job. If you're lucky, you get a week or two in between. If you're lucky, oftentimes you leave one job, you move across country or move to the next city and start the job right away. So that was the first time I could like actually catch my breath. And I thought, like, what does my life look like if I'm not doing this? Because I was starting to feel the impact. I had to take that breath because I really feel it in my body. I was feeling the impact of having told the hardest stories repeatedly for a long time. That takes a toll on you.
So you were thinking about leaving news then, after HLN.
I was like, let me see what it looks like. Let me at least ask the question. I hadn't said it out loud, but I was like, what else is out there? If not news, then what else? And so, started.
And that was driven by fatigue of the news.
It was less, at that point, I wouldn't have said that.
Well, yeah, I know.
At that point, if you'd asked me, I would have said, I just want to see what else is available. Because for a long time, I had a dream of doing my own more talk format show. More on that later. I had long had that dream. And so I was like, let me just test the water. Since I have this break, let's see what's out there. So we took meetings all over town. We had a show, a concept that we were pitching with another fella, the two of us hosting. There was a lot of projects that were like people, production houses were like, "Oh, you're interesting. Oh, we like you." And producers would take meetings with me, and things were like, there was kind of some momentum and it was feeling kind of good. And the pandemic hit. And you remember, we didn't know if we were coming back to an industry. We didn't know anything. We didn't know, like we really didn't know. And so like everybody, I sat there stunned for, a couple months, like isolating, not really sure what world was going to exist once we emerged. And I remember thinking a few months in, I was kind of like, okay, God, I was looking around and seeing there was worry. I could feel the worry in the news and in the content. And I felt like everybody was just like this. And I remember thinking like, put me in, coach. I feel like they need someone to soothe and say, okay, everybody take a breath. Like, we're going to get through this. Let's just figure this out one step at a time. And that was what my heart said. And that was sort of my prayer. And we got a call, my agent and I got a call from a woman you may or may not have heard of, Erica Hill Rodriguez, who is now the news director at KTLA, but she was the newly minted news director at Channel 11 at Good Day, at Channel 11, as she had come from Seattle. And she had reached out and said, look, we're looking at doing some specials because we've got all of the hits, runs, and errors and numbers and the Fauci, press conferences. We've got all that covered. We're kind of looking at what about how we're doing? How are we coping? How's our mental health? How are we staying connected? How are our kids doing? How are our elders doing? We're looking to have some of those conversations. Would that interest you at all?
Well,
Me? Interested in that at all? So I was like, yeah, that feels right. That feels right. I could keep doing these. At that point, I'd been doing some Instagram lives and having a great time doing that. And I was like, yeah, let's pull that thread. That could be really cool. That ended up turning into them saying, hey, do you want to come over and do our morning show? And I was like, that's different. And I had to think about it. I had to think about it if I wanted to start, doing that again.
But Erica was the person to do it with. I mean, I've known Erica forever, and she's an amazing news executive and leader, and such a beautiful person. So,
I got to tell you, hesitation. I will always take her call. If she asked me to do anything, including pet sit, I'd be like, sure. She's all the things you said. She's an uncommonly extraordinary human, and I feel beyond lucky to have met her, worked alongside her, known her, and have her on my team and be on her teams. I know you feel the same way. Didn't know that then, so I was kind of like, let's see who this chick is, But I liked her. I liked her at the start, and I thought,
she sucked you back in.
yeah, right? Because I was like, this right here. Come on, man. Come on. But I also was looking around, and all of the people who I had met with, a lot of them had lost their jobs. A lot of those places weren't even doing anything. They weren't producing stuff. Nothing was going on, right? Production was shut down. News continued. And I sort of thought, okay, I like this woman. I like her vision. I like what she's asking me to do. I can do that. And again, let's go do it. So we did it for 2 years and had a ball and had some tremendous conversations. And then it was time to move on to the next.
And at that point, did you know you were done with news then? Or are you?
I believe I am. I've learned to never say never. Who said, I'm never doing news and then just spent 30 years doing news, right? No, I believe news and I are done. And I'll say this. I personally think that there's a finite amount of time that a person can do news. And it's not because of your looks and it's not because of your energy. That may be true for some people, but it's because I think and by the way, there's some beasts out there and I salute them and I'm so glad they're still doing it. We need them. This is not, I'm not,
bashing the industry or
No,
anything, not
not at
negative.
all. And this
Absolutely
is
not.
no
It's great.
assessment of of journalism or whatever. It is more about the lane I need to be in. This is a
Right.
very personal thing for me. At that point, I was like, I was watching how much a toll it was having on my soul. I felt as though my soul was bruised with all of it.
And you're not saying the industry, you're saying the impact of
Of telling the
experiencing that
truth.
every day.
Of
It is
being
the
in it
same.
every day. The
Yeah, it's the
black
same for
man dying, at the hands of the police. It was, Vegas, the Vegas shooting. The Vegas shooting, I remember how much an impact that had on us. These people are struggling. I was watching how it affected everybody in the building. Security guards, makeup artists, the photographers, the editors who had to sit there and listen to the sound over and over and over of gunfire and people weeping and families being torn apart by the most devastating news. And I was like, I'm not even there. I later had Anyway, so they ended up sending a psychologist, a therapist into the building the next day. And I made a point of walking down the hall and going in and sitting with him.
But you're right. I think there's some of us can do it for so long. That's the way I felt. That's why I had to leave. I'm like, I can't really just do this anymore. But then one of my mentors, Nancy Bauer Gonzalez,
She's amazing.
she's 10 years older than I am, and she's still doing it.
Yep. I think it's very personal, Jason, right?
Yeah.
Like at your point, right? It's almost like a pain tolerance, right?
Right.
Some people can do a filling without any Novocaine, but I'm going to be like, shoot me up, doc. Like whatever.
But at some point, you kind of feel like, why can't I do it? Is it a failure? But I don't think that's it. I think the older you get, you just realize that this is your life and this is who you are, and there's only so much you can do before you have to go do something else.
Yeah. Agreed. I think that it's a very intensely personal decision. I think it's a difficult decision. I remember feeling the same thing. I was like, why? How come it doesn't hurt people the way it's hurting me? It was having the therapist that I went to see that day said two things to me. He said, there is something called bystander trauma. And he said that he believes that journalists are experiencing that with these headlines.
I've never heard that, but that makes a lot of sense. Bystander trauma.
Yep. People that witness car accidents, first responders have PTSD. They weren't in the accident, but so we're learning more about trauma, and I'm glad we are. And I've done a lot of work to help myself get through what I've had to cover for years. And then the second thing about it that he told me to do, because this was really powerful. I remember him saying, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but he said, I think, because I told him I sort of stand in people's grief when I'm talking to Michael Brown's mother or, a family member of someone who was shot in the church in Charleston. I stand in their grief with them. And then I just feel like because I'm a sponge, I take it all on. And then I'm now bearing the weight of that. And he said, you need to allow that person, as horrible as it is, you have to recognize them as a fully autonomous human and that this is their experience to go through. You can stand in solidarity with them. You can bear witness to them, but you can't hold their grief for them because that will take you down. He said, imagine yourself when you're covering these stories. Remember being a kid and reading those fairy tales that said, once upon a time, and the narrator would tell the story, but they weren't involved in the story. He's like, you really have to think of yourself as the narrator. And so I started doing that as best as I could.
That's amazing advice. That is actually
Powerful.
really, really good advice of Lynn to look at it, because we do take it on, especially on those breaking news stories that go on for hours and hours and hours. And you're just covering it. I mean, that's
not even just 6 hours on the air. Like, think about the fires, right?
Yeah.
Think about the fires here locally, and there was no letting up. And by the way, that is our job, and it's what we're meant to do. And we need those people there. Journalism matters. It matters more than ever before. I can't say that enough, but it does take a toll.
So now I feel like you're moving into a phase where you want to do TV now, but not kind of what you want to do instead of what the news dictates what it wants to do.
Let's be honest too. I've been doing it for over 30 years, right? Yeah. And so a girl gets to start doing things a little differently. So, We had been out for the past 2 years trying to get a talk show off the ground for me, but market pressures facing syndication over the past 2 seasons resulted in no talk shows going. And what we learned very quickly was that new programs have to be these multi-platform projects and have to provide room for sponsorship opportunities and provide sponsorship opportunities. So my partner, my producing partner and I, Ed Madison, professor of journalism at the University of Oregon, by the way, I have to give him a shout out. He and I are now kind of looking at and reimagining what's best for us and what's viable. We're, looking at weekly formats, partnerships with major brands. We started a production company, looking at doing socially impactful stories and documentaries and projects like that.
I don't want to dwell on it, but the thing with the daytime show, what I really thought was interesting is you guys really were trying to create something new and different. It's not the typical daytime conflict talk.
100%. 100%. Look, for me, it was really important to sort of not be part of this dominant negative narrative. And by the way, do not get it twisted. This isn't me being Pollyanna, but there is a difference between Pollyanna and where we're at right now. I think what we need to do is celebrate the wins, right? I think we need to look at, the change makers and the human spirit and our ability to be resilient. The people that are saying, I've identified a problem and I'm working to fix it. That's, to me, those are the stories that we need to be reminded of instead of just, this isn't working, this isn't working. I'm glad there's people out there doing that. We need the firebrands out there pointing out what's not wrong. But for me and where my spirit leads me is that.
But so now I think there is, what you're saying is that syndicated world, you have to come with multiple revenue streams, it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, they have to be multi-platform, that you have to think about partnerships with major brands. It's just a different game because the whole industry, the syndication industry is shrinking and changing. Think about our own habits, right? Most people that I know, and a lot of people, let's not just say most, a lot of people are cutting their cords. A lot of people are streaming instead of watching just the networks. So you have to think differently. The model has changed dramatically. It has changed dramatically. And by the way, this is my own personal take. I don't think TV will go away in the same way that radio didn't go away or newspapers didn't go away. They've changed, they've shifted, but we are always going to need storytelling. We're storytelling animal, right? Humans have been telling stories
around the cave fire, the fire.
Yeah. So the mechanism by which they may be delivered to us or to you will change. That's sure to be. But I think stories will always be with us.
So do you have a particular format or idea that or even a platform that you're most interested in at this point?
I'm actually kind of platform agnostic. I think that comes from my early days at Tech TV.
And you're an Android user too.
I am proudly, and you hate it, don't you? You're all of my iPhone friends hate it, and I'm like, yeah, go ahead. You go ahead and hate. Don't even look. I'm very adamantly an Android user, but I will tell you, it's funny because that time at Tech TV, for background for people, it was a company that was all about technology and computing at the birth of the internet. And so they took a bunch of TV people like myself and a bunch of geeks, and the geeks taught the TV people about technology. And we taught them how to do TV. And it was kind of like this beautiful mashup. It was so ahead of its time, and it launched 1,000 careers. But what it taught me was how to be a smart early adopter, and how to be skeptically optimistic about technological advances and be curious about them, but not allow them to take over my life. I recognize the importance of social media, but I'm not going to live out loud on social media. I just won't. I won't do it. A, I'm not that interesting, and B, I need to keep some privacy and some of my own self to self. It'll be a beast that will never be fed, So to me, the question about what happens now, I think there's a lot of hand wringing and, like worry and what have you. And I get that because change is hard for us humans. Change is very hard for us. And this is a big change. But I think it's also exciting. The possibility is exciting. It's going to take some time, I believe, for things to kind of settle in because, in a way, the streaming world and all of that is like the Wild West right now. And they're trying to figure it all out. But I think it could be pretty cool.
I think so too. I think right now the biggest challenge is discovery. Sometimes we'll spend an hour trying to find something to watch. I'm like, this is worse than the old flipping through the 500 channels on
Remember
cable.
when we used to complain about there's nothing to watch and you got like 8,000, literally 8,000 cable channels. There's nothing to watch. Now we're saying there's nothing to watch. And you got 8,000 apps on your phone or on your television. It's the truth. And yet nothing to watch.
I think you're right. I think I guess it's always going to be evolving. I just feel like we evolve and the evolution of the change happens more quickly now than.
Boy, doesn't it? We were talking. So it's funny that you say that. We were talking about, there was a Back to the Future marathon the other day. And I was sort of, thought experiment of, and my partner and I were talking about like, I'm surprised they haven't redone that like more currently. But we realized like the changes, they're not as profound as say from 1985 to 1965, the things that changed. Yet from now to back to 85, it's stunning to me. When I think about the things that my parents, your parents have seen in their lifetime.
That's true.
It's shocking how much change has happened. Like just the fact, look at you and I are talking on Riverside. We're doing a podcast. If you had said the word podcast to somebody, 20 years ago, is that safe to say?
Probably. Yeah.
There's been a bunch of people out there doing podcasts for a long time, but let's say 25 years, just to be safe. 25 years, if you were said the word podcast, people would look at you like you'd grown a second head, and look.
They're like, it's radio on demand. I'm like, they'd be like, what? What does that even mean?
I know, exactly. So now we got Substack and we've got all these, you know what I mean? Like there's all these things. It's exciting and it's also slightly terrifying to try and keep up with it all. But we just muddle along.
But I feel like at our age too, it's an opportunity for us to reinvent and do something. That's why I've learned more and I have had more fun in the last month and a half creating this whole thing. It's just been remarkable.
That reinvention thing, I think, is so important for people of our vintage, I will say. Honestly, because, and when I say reinvention, I don't mean like, shave your head, buy a Camaro.
Not Madonna reinvention, just
right. Yeah, we're not, and not even a rebrand. It's just a slight, like, oftentimes it's just that much of an adjustment in your life. For example, I always told myself that I wasn't creative. How about that lie that I believed for like 50 something years?
What do you mean?
I really believed that I wasn't creative because in my mind,
you weren't creative.
Yeah.
I thought you said you were a creative.
No, that I wasn't creative at all, like just not at all. And because I had in my mind assumed that like to be creative, you had to be a literal artist painting or playing a concerto or, singing an aria or, a hit pop song or whatever. And the fact is, art lives in all of us. All of us are creative. Creativity lives in all of us. I've just been sort of, allowing it to come out more. That's what I've been enjoying over the past little while is just exploring creativity.
That's true. That's good advice to give to other people. Let's backtrack just a little bit because what advice would you give to someone who's thinking of leaving or is kind of ready to go or a lot of people are getting laid off these days.
Yeah.
The industry is shrinking. So what advice would you give them to kind of help prepare the way?
Take a big deep breath. First of all, you're gonna be okay. Let me just tell you, you're gonna be okay. Let those shoulders drop down a second, because I think we panic, and we've always been taught in our industry, you'll become irrelevant. Don't, like all of this, it's just fear. And it's like, take a breath, turn to the people who know and love you best. Keep it small and trust them. If you have ideas and thoughts, bounce them off them. First of all, those are your trusted advisory board. Establish an advisory board if you have them. Take some time to really contemplate the ifs and the what ifs. And a friend of mine always says this phrase, if not this, what else is possible, right? What else is possible for you? What would you tell a friend who is in that similar position? Sit down and journal. Look, This is like the 12th journal I've been through in the last while. Like, put it on paper, because I find that if you can get it out of your head where it keeps you up at 3 a.m, never a good time to have those thoughts, because anxiety always comes and plays a part, and those two aren't friends. Get it out in your journal, write it down. Can be, train of thought, stream of consciousness, whatever. Just get it out. And then start to play with ideas. Play with them. You don't have to make it so. What would it look like if I did this? How does it feel if I think about teaching? And if it scares you enough, maybe that's the right thing. I've learned that in my own life. But really explore and be willing to do that with a trusted friend. Bounce it off them. Ask them how they see you. When you see me and the skill set that I have, where do you see me in your mind's eye? Doing what? You'll be surprised at what they say.
Where you see things going next?
That's a hard thing to answer in today's world.
Yeah.
Right. I'm taking one day at a time. Sat down. A friend of mine gave us all this really cool workbook. My girlfriends gave each one of us one of these workbooks for Christmas. And the idea is at the beginning of the year, you sat down, you looked at the year that passed and write down all the things that were terrible, you hated, didn't like, and the things you learned from the year and the things you wanted to leave behind from the year. And then you looked ahead to the next year about what you wanted to bring with you into the new year, what you wanted to leave behind, and what you'd hoped for. And I focused on the hope for. I'd like to do more public speaking. I'd like to travel a bit with that. I'd like to do, I know I have a book in me, and I have two friends that are trying to divine it out of me, wrestle it out of me.
That's a lot of work, though.
And by the way, like that
time commitment.
But Jason, that could take me 30 years and I'd be fine with it. I'm not in a rush to do it. Like, I just know there is a book that needs to come out at some point. I want to grow this production company. I want to make content and tell stories that connect us and that help us celebrate the human spirit. And I want to and help us feel connected, because that's the thing that I'm feeling is people feel really disconnected. And I'd like to be part of things and projects that help us feel more connected to one another. Because, with all that's going on, we've got each other. We have community. That's what
I feel the same way. I feel the same way. And I feel like that's why I ended up doing what I'm doing now, is because
that you're doing.
I missed that connection with people. And even just this has been a fun, interesting, emotional conversation. But even just the comments and the feedback I get from social on it, it's just nice to reconnect with people, or even people you don't even know.
You don't even know. To say. Yeah. Look, it's here we often that's the beauty of what we have, the path that we've both chosen, is that, you have an impact on people, and we don't always have the benefit of knowing what that impact is. Every once in a while, this woman stopped me recently in the last 6 months. She gave me the biggest hug, little slip of a woman, gave me a big hug, and she said, "Sis, you saved me and my husband during the pandemic." Well, you don't even know. You saved us during the pandemic. And that not just I see you on TV, that's cool. That's lovely. Don't get me wrong. That kind of feedback, that's precious. That's really precious. How about you? Are you having the time of your life doing this, babe?
I am. Actually,
you're really good at it.
It's been a lot of fun. It really has. Well, thank you for joining me too. I think you're going to do amazing things, and I can't wait to see. That's why I want to have you on to see what's going on and see what's next.
You're the best, Jason. It's an absolute delight to see you in this format. You're doing brilliantly. I think it's going to be so great, and I think you're going to have a series of incredible conversations.
Well, thank you. This is one of them for sure.
Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Bye-bye.
Smooches.
The best place to follow Michaela is on Instagram at Michaela Pereira. MichaelaPereira. The link's in the show notes. On the next episode of Life After News, we learn how to menopause. Yes, you heard me right. Tamsin Fidel, who anchored many years at Pix 11 in New York, experienced her first symptom of menopause live on the air. You're going to hear about that and how now she is focusing on destigmatizing menopause. She's got a documentary out and a best-selling book called How to Menopause. You'll hear more about that. It's a fascinating conversation. All right. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Spotify, Apple, iHeart, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch the video version of the show on YouTube at Life After News. Please subscribe there as well. You can follow me on Instagram at Mr. Jason Ball or at Life After News Pod. New episodes drop every Tuesday. If you like the show, give us good ratings and share with friends. Thanks so much.